Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Love Your Dogs podcast. This podcast is heart led, real life, experience based, and not dry science, where I'm shedding light on the truths about caring for our dogs. This episode is the very first episode of the Love Your Dogs podcast. So I appreciate everyone taking a chance on it. And I've been juggling with figuring out how exactly to start things off. Of course, an intro is the obvious choice. And I think that's where we'll go. The problem is this video will be on YouTube. And I do already have a very sincere, heartfelt, detailed intro slash my journey video on YouTube. It exists. It's the first one. So I'm going to go ahead and tell most of you now that if you want all of the details and the emotion to go there, because my story is pretty heartbreaking and tragic. And anytime I do end up talking about it, it gets emotional and I get off track and I start to ramble. And I want these podcasts to be nice and concise and just full of good information and not a whole lot of fluff. So if you're interested in hearing the whole story, please go check out that first YouTube video on my channel at the end of this podcast, or you can do it now. But for now, let me just try to give as much of an overview as I can about why I am here doing what I'm doing. So I am Bree Drake. I am what I have termed myself as a holistic dog health educator. Now, I am a certified holistic pet health coach as well. And how I got here is kind of a twisty, turny little journey. Had two golden retrievers, Skipper and Anne. They were the loves of our lives, my husband and I. And it was when our sweet girl Anne was about coming up on 11 years old, and Skip was about 7 years old, where Anne was starting to slow down a lot. She was starting to show signs of, really bad arthritis, stiff, not wanting to jump in and out of the car, not wanting to go up and down stairs. So it was at that point, they had been they're kibble fed up until this point their entire lives, up to date on vaccines. They got their monthly flea, tick, and heartworm prevention like clockwork. I was a good dog parent by those standards. So a lot of you listening here probably still think that a good dog parent is one that takes their dog to the vet every year anytime something's wrong, and you walk out of the vet with your little doggy bag of antibiotics or pain meds or flea and tick prevention, and with your invoice that shows that your dog is current on vaccines, and you feel on top of the world. You feel like you're doing everything you're supposed to be doing for your dog. And that's where I was. That's what I was doing with Skip and Ann. And we'll come back to that. But so Skip and Ann were kibble fed, current on everything by conventional standards. So when I was starting to think about what to do for Anne as she was getting older, I just started Googling online, what can I do for hip and joint support? So I found an organic hip and joint chew, like a little chew that you add to the food daily. And it was about $40 a month. And I can remember thinking like, oh my gosh, this extra $40 a month is a lot. And I had to remember to give it to her with her meals. Boy, have things changed since then. But that's kind of where I started. And obviously that was not enough. Things weren't getting better, it was getting worse. So a few months later, we decided we've got to bring her in to see the vet and get some blood work done, get some x-rays done, see what's really going on. And as expected, the vet said she had severe arthritis and some hip dysplasia and some evidence of cruciate ligament tearing, and that her blood work looked pretty normal. But that vet gave me some mystery pain pills and said, these will make her feel like new. I give them to my dog, and he's like a new dog. Give her these pills. So basically, suppress her pain, don't address what's causing the pain, and just do that for the rest of her life. And that didn't sit well with me. And this same vet, bless his heart, he's an old school vet. He did also encourage me to look into acupuncture, because he had seen dogs who had went to a different clinic and received acupuncture, and he couldn't deny that it was powerful and that he'd seen dramatic changes for the better in the dogs that were getting acupuncture. So I did that. So I found a vet that was about an hour and a half away from me. And remember, this will be a common theme, that your best vet may not be the one that's just 5, 10, 15 minutes, 20 minutes down the road. You may have to travel or meet with a good vet virtually. So keep that in the back of your mind. So I traveled an hour and a half to this vet. She was still a conventional vet. And when I say conventional, that means they're most likely just the vet that you know about. They went to traditional vet school. They suppress symptoms, they administer antibiotics and vaccines. Usually our emergency vets are conventional vets that perform surgeries and diagnostics and x-rays, all those types of things, but they don't have any additional alternative therapy type skills in their toolbox. Just remember that too. So this vet was conventional, but she did have a certification in traditional Chinese veterinary medicine. So this stood her apart. She did do acupuncture, she did some laser therapy, chiropractic work. So she was kind of borderline integrative veterinarian. But I walked into it not knowing what to expect, having never received acupuncture myself. I didn't have a clue what was going to happen. But I was pleasantly surprised to realize that this vet, I walked into the room with Anne, our sweet older golden, and she sat on the floor with Anne and talked to me for a good 45 minutes, getting a good feel for Anne's lifestyle and her history and her diet and her tendencies and whether or not she ran hot or cold. We talked a lot about food therapy and energetics and how that plays into supporting our dogs. And it was just so refreshing to finally talk to a vet that cared because up until then, my only experience with vets was that you would walk in, see the receptionist, wait, I don't know, 15, 20, 30 minutes, and you go into the exam room, wait again. The tech would come in, speak to you for a few minutes, and then you'd be waiting in the exam room for another 10, 20, 30 minutes sometimes. The doctor would come in, talk to you for 5 to 10 minutes, and you'd be on your way out. You'd see the receptionist, pick up your little bag of meds, get your updated invoice telling you when your next vaccines were due. You'd likely walk out with your next round of Brevecto or HeartGuard, and that would be it. So for this vet to sit and talk to me and really want to ask questions about Anne and get to the bottom of what was going on with her was just so refreshing. Again, like refreshing is the best way to put it. And I just never knew this existed. I never knew these types of vets were out there. So I know a lot of you probably don't know either. So that vet was who opened my eyes to fresh food feeding. And I'd always known in the back of my mind, I knew about people that cooked for their dogs, but just like many of you listening, you probably have no idea where to begin. It's so foreign, it's so overwhelming and daunting and intimidating. So I just never went there. Even though I knew the kibble wasn't the best thing, I never went there myself. So this was the first vet to tell me that I needed to, or what was going to help Anne the most was to reduce the inflammation. And the best, quickest way, the most significant way to move the needle on her inflammation was to feed her fresher food. So she talked me into taking Anne's kibble, which was Royal Canin, Royal Canine. I'm not even embarrassed that I don't know how to say that. The Golden Retriever adult formula. I thought that was the best of the best food at the time. So I her meals and I started doing half of that kibble and then half a blend of, I think it was cooked ground turkey, some cooked cod fillets, and alternating between that blend and then cooked eggs. So I did that. And of course, I wasn't going to leave Skip out of that. He is 4 years younger, wasn't experiencing the same things. But if I was switching her food to half fresh and half kibble, I was going to do the same for him. So that change it changed everything for me. Seeing Anne improve so much, so drastically by that diet change alone, just switching half of her kibble to fresh food, the biggest, most obvious change was that within a couple of weeks, she'd been wearing the same collar her entire life. And you know your dog's collar, they've been wearing it a long time. There's a hole that the collar's in, and it's nice and worn and indented. You know which hole is the hole that the collar needs to be on. We had to tighten her collar. Sorry, that probably made some noise. Had to tighten her collar down 3 to 4 holes within a couple of weeks because she depuffed. There was that much inflammation. It wasn't weight loss in her neck. She was just so inflamed that changing that food and finally getting some real hydration and real food into her system helped the inflammation go down drastically in just a couple of weeks. So I was sold. I was sold from then on out. That's all I needed to see. And that's why if you're here because you follow me on Instagram, I should have mentioned that in the beginning, but I am Bree Drake and I am the heart and soul behind at Taleswell Health on Instagram. You've probably seen my posts about the problems with our vets and with vaccines and kibble and all the things. So if you're here because you've been supporting me there, thank you so much. I just wanted to mention that that's who I am and that is my account. Um, Gosh, where was I even gonna go with that? So, shoot, I forget where I was going with that. Let me back up a second. So I was talking about Anne and depuffing, the dehydration. Oh yeah, so I was sold and I immediately knew that I needed more. I began everyone I talked to, every dog parent that I talked to, I was telling about this revelation, about this newfound way of taking care of our dogs, just giving them some fresh food. And it was through talking to a good friend of mine, Melissa. She told me about the Forever Dog book. And she said, you know what? It's a great book, but it's going to piss you off. It's going to make you so angry. And it did. It did just that. If you've read that book, you know. And I'm not talking about the Forever Dog Life book, which is the newer book that's more practical and application based. I'm talking about the original Forever Dog, which is like a big novel of scientifically dense information. But I read that book and it made me angry. I was so angry that I had thought all along I was doing everything I was supposed to do for my dogs by following that conventional veterinary checklist, by feeding the best kibble, by keeping them up to date on shots, by keeping them current on their flea and tick and heartworm preventatives. I thought I was doing everything right. So when I learned that a lot of that is very harmful to our dogs, especially in excess, and especially since we're not doing anything to support them and help them with their detox pathways, learning about the dangers of tap water, unfiltered water. I mean, what's being used in our homes, cleaning wise, what's sprayed on our furniture, our rugs, dog beds, what's in dog toys. Seeing all of that was like being fit with, or reading all of that was like being hit with a fire hose. And I know that's probably how a lot of my content comes off for anyone stumbling across my Instagram account. It feels like a fire hose when you hear it all for the first time because you have so much trust in medical professionals and there's so many parallels on the human side. And so that hit me like a fire hose. I was overwhelmed. I was kind of paralyzed. I wanted to change everything all at once, but as you know, with something of this magnitude, it takes learning and evolving and growing and taking baby steps. Like just taking one small step a day is making a huge difference. So I would say to where I am now, it's probably 3 or 4 years ago that I read the Forever Dog book. I mean, it's been an evolution and an ongoing journey. I'm still learning every single day. But I finally think this past year is where I became extremely confident, especially this past year of raising my first naturally reared puppy, Pine, who y'all have seen on Instagram if you follow me. I've gained so much confidence applying what I had learned and working one on one with other dog parents in various situations with various breeds of all shapes and sizes and ages, your confidence just continues to grow as you take these steps and make changes and see the positive results. So that's kind of what started the holistic journey for me is seeing that vet who got me to switch to fresh food, who got me talking to people, who got me reading the Forever Dog book, and then sent me on this unstoppable path, like lit this fire in me that couldn't be put out to do better for my dog. So I started doing better for them. Through reading the Forever Dog book, I realized that the most minimally processed, most species appropriate, most bioavailable diet for dogs is a raw diet. And at the time, only knew for fresh food for dogs, I only knew of the fresh food that they sold in the grocery stores, like in the refrigerated section. And I knew about Farmer's Dog. I think Farmer's Dog had just recently aired their first commercial during the Super Bowl. So I think everybody knows about them now, which is they're not a food I would feed, by the way. And then I knew about We Feed Raw only because a friend of mine had listened to the the founder of We Feed Raw speak. And that's the only way I knew. So those were my two options. So I quickly filled out questionnaires on both of their websites and realized that feeding my two very large golden retrievers was going to be about $600 a month. And I said, I don't think I can afford that. I was maybe spending 150 to 200 a month at most on their dry dog food. So that was a lot. So I bought a book that was like a sister book to the Forever Dog book written by Dr. Karen Becker as well. And it was on preparing raw or cooked meals at home yourself. But I'm going to be honest, it's not really well done. It was a book that involved a lot of like spreadsheeting, calculations, just very, um, it was overwhelming. It was too much. It was creating complete and balanced meals by AFCO minimum standards, which, if you don't know what that is, it's basically the standards that all commercial pet food have to meet to be sold in a nutshell. And that may not might not even be entirely true, but I don't want to go too deep into that topic right now because you see I'm already getting off track. So I was trying to make complete and balanced meals at home. I thought, okay, I made a plan, mapped out how much it was going to cost. I had Excel spreadsheets based on that book. And I figured out that I could do it for around $300 a month for both, which that wasn't near as bad as $600. And I thought, you know what? I can spend one day a month preparing all of this food for both of them, and that won't be so bad. I put it in the freezer, thaw it out. That's not going to be bad. I think we lasted about 3 months. I think I did 2 months on my own and then brought my husband in just for one final, like, let's see if we can do this together, if it makes it any better. It was awful. It was so messy, so time consuming, so overwhelming, just wasn't going to work. So I decided, you know what? I'm so passionate about this stuff. I really love talking about it with others. I really want to feed my dogs We Feed Raw, which right now I love them. They were great to me, but it's not a food that I would personally feed. And we'll get into that at a later date. In short, I don't prefer to feed pre-made or any food that has synthetic vitamins and minerals in it. And I know that may be a lot. We'll get into that at a later date, but that's the main reason why I don't feed their food because of the synthetic vitamins and minerals. They're meeting AFCO minimum standards by adding those synthetics instead of using whole foods. I think they're working towards getting better, and I don't want to say anything bad about them because they were so good to me. So I basically, I want to say sold my soul, but I decided I would share with my current Instagram following We Feed Raw and why I firmly believe in raw feeding our dogs and feeding the food from a company like We Feed Raw. I'm like, I can do this. This is the only way I can really afford it for both my dogs, and I know how important it is. So I'm going to do this. I'm going to help others while I'm helping this company and while I'm helping my dogs. And I always, so I started doing that before I go into another tangent. I started doing that. I started sharing some content on my personal page. And mind you, my personal page was more fly fishing and outdoor adventures, photography, lots of Skip and Ann content. So it was fitting. It was okay to talk gently about how we can do better for our dogs. But this is obviously not mainstream information and it was getting controversial. So I learned quickly that sharing it with that following that I had been growing over 10 or more years was not really fair to shove this kind of information in people's faces if they didn't want it. So I was thinking all along, I probably need to start a separate account that's dedicated to this mission, but I didn't do it quite at that moment. So things were going good. I stopped all flea and tick meds for Skip and Ann. I stopped vaccines. I stopped kibble. I started feeding just We Feed Raw. I started giving them filtered water and yeah, doing all the things. I was on top of the world. About a year or so into that, I got slammed with horrible news that Anne had oral cancer. I go into detail in that first YouTube video again. I'm going to try and make this short. So she was diagnosed with oral cancer, and that was a hard blow given that I'd been making all these great changes for them. But I knew, and this is something I always want to drive home when I'm talking about this, is that the fact that she was diagnosed with cancer and cancer ultimately took her life, that doesn't mean that this holistic approach doesn't work. It just means that you have to start as early as possible. So if you're listening now, don't be overwhelmed or stressed, but start learning as much as you can about how you can do better for your dogs because Anne had been cared for in a conventional way, like conventionally raised for 11 years. And that it takes a very long time to undo that, especially that far along in life. So the longer that they're getting overburdened by vaccines and toxins and like flea and tick meds and antibiotics and all the things in the environment we can't control, the longer they're being burdened, the longer it's going to take to undo that and get them back to balance and back to homeostasis. So that's something I always want to make clear is because people might assume like, oh, she was doing all this stuff and her dog still got cancer. Well, it's not as simple as that. It was a long life of veterinary overreach and doing things the wrong way, which I thought was the right way. And it was really hard to undo that. I didn't have time. It was too late. I do believe that both of them lived longer as a result of the things I was doing, that they probably wouldn't have stuck around as long if I hadn't made those changes. So she was diagnosed with oral cancer. We didn't, at her age, and so it was a tumor at the base of her tongue, like closer to her throat. At her age, we decided we're not going to do any conventional stuff. We're not doing surgery, we're not doing radiation, chemo, none of that. And the vet that I was seeing, the acupuncture vet, I love her, but remember she was a conventional vet. So when I denied those services or those conventional treatments, she agreed, but she also told me that if I didn't go that route, that the list of options was short. So that left me feeling really discouraged. And I later learned that the list of options was actually quite long. And I ultimately connected with a holistic veterinarian who helped me support Anne holistically. And although she was given only about 60 days to live since I declined conventional treatment, she ended up living for almost 9 more months. And she lived a really great life for most of those 9 months. Towards the end, she was in rough shape. I arguably probably took her, I probably kept her a little too long selfishly. I learned that lesson is you got to think of quality of death as much as you have to think of quality of life. So don't wait too long. But we did it. And she had a beautiful, peaceful passing. We were able to have the vet come to our house and put her down in the yard. So that was Anne's story. And unfortunately, about 2 months after Anne was diagnosed with cancer, Skip, at just 8.5 years old, was diagnosed with an extremely aggressive form of cancer called hemangiosarcoma. And if that word just gave you a chill and just made you sick to your stomach or tears well up in your eyes, I'm sorry, because if you know about it and you've lost a dog to it, you know how traumatizing and scary it is. I won't get into the details of that one, but basically, we found out and he was gone 6 weeks later. So, their story is why I'm here, why this podcast exists, why you're here listening to this crazy holistic pet health coach, holistic dog health educator who's not a vet. It's why you're here listening to me because I love dogs. I love my dogs so much, and I love every dog. I think every dog deserves so much better. All of you listening deserve so much better than what we've been told our whole lives is good dog care. I mean, we all deserve to know the truth and to know how best to care for our dogs. And sure, the conventional way is the most convenient. It's the most clear cut. It's like a checklist. You vaccine at X, Y, and Z ages every single year, every 3 years. You spay and neuter at this age. You feed this kibble. You come back. You get blood work. It's clear cut. It's very easy. It's very convenient. But if you want a dog that's healthy and potentially living longer, you got to put in the work to learn how to do that and unlearn some of that conventional way of thinking. And it takes some learning. There is a learning curve, but once you get there, you've got the knowledge for life, for your current dogs, for your future dogs, for yourself. It's amazing how much more mindful you are about human health as well when you're learning about the dog stuff. It all goes hand in hand. So, a little more about me. I don't come from a background in medicine. I'm not a veterinary professional. I'm not a vet. Very transparent about that. And while I was considering creating an account like Tailswell, I thought no one's ever going to listen to me. I don't have doctor in front of my name. I'm not a vet. Why would people listen to me? But I know that a lot of my following and my supporters would all rather hear from someone like me than a medical professional. And I'm the same way. I look at someone being a licensed medical professional as a red flag and a reason to be guarded and careful because while they're so well intended and they get into medicine because they love people and they love animals and they love helping, there's darker forces who train them and they're indoctrinated. They are indoctrinated. They follow a script. They're scared of losing their license if they say certain things, or they just truly believe everything and won't step outside of it, won't think outside of the box, won't think critically. They just follow what they've been taught. And what they've been taught is to suppress symptoms, to make symptoms go away. and they have not been taught how to support humans, support dogs in a way that yields true health and wellness, to put it mildly. So I'm not a vet, and I wanted to be a vet so badly when I was a little girl, and now knowing everything that I know, I couldn't be more thankful that I didn't go that route because even now, knowing what I know, I have considered going to vet school at some degree, even just a vet assistant or vet tech just to get some more knowledge and, hope that that gives me more credibility, but I don't want to be naive there. That's not going to change anything, and I think it would be really difficult for me to go through that mainstream veterinary training. It would be extremely difficult for me, and I would be so scared that I could be indoctrinated to some degree. So I never went that route, and I am highly educated. I spent a lot of time in school. I got a bachelor's in accounting, a master's in business. I went on to get a CPA license. So I worked professionally in the accounting and finance field for about 10, 11 years. And then my sweet husband pulled me out of that. I moved from Florida to South Carolina to be with him and marry him. And he told me that I should pursue things that made me happy, basically. And through that, I was self taught in photography and graphic design and had a great creative career doing logos and branding and photography. And then, Skip and Anne, their health issues and what happened to them helped me to find my true passion, and that's helping people and helping their dogs. And I made it my mission to do right and do good in their names for what happened to them. And it's 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 wild to me how all of that experience that seems unrelated has helped me to be so good at educating and sharing information in a visually appealing and meaningful way that reaches a lot of people. So this is where my imposter syndrome comes in again. There's so many wonderful veterinarians and breeders and groomers and business owners out there that have been at this for far longer than me. So I'm always like, why me? Why did I get this massive community so quickly? I mean, I just started Tailswell a little over a year ago, and I didn't even get a chance to celebrate 5,000 followers, 10,000 followers. And not that it's about followers at all, but I didn't get a chance to celebrate those milestones because everything grew so quickly. It would have been like every few days. So I'm so grateful for that. And I'm just so grateful for everyone's support, even though I'm pretty new compared to a lot of you more experienced people that I look up to so much. But know that I am passionate and I am serious about my research and what I'm sharing, and I am serious about doing better for dogs. And I am highly educated and am good. I am good with discernment and knowing when something is a credible source or not, and only sharing the best of the best information in a way that's not sugar coated, because that's something else I'm passionate about. Is I think that most professionals, even our good holistic vets and homeopathic vets, they have to be somewhat guarded because their licenses could be at stake. So I get it. So I, having nothing to lose in that regard, can be fully transparent and honest about a lot of these topics. Now, I flirt with possibly being silenced and censored now and then, but you all deserve the truth. So that is my goal, is to give good information, real information, helpful information, give the truth, do better for our dogs. And that's why I'm here. So I did have that education, and I that unrelated education. And then I was listening to the Your Natural Dog podcast. It's Angela Ardolino's podcast. She's the founder of CBD Dog Health and Myco Dog. She's amazing. She was interviewing Jessica Fisher, who's now Jessica Arrington. And Jessica was talking about her experience becoming a certified holistic pet health coach in Dr. Ruth Roberts' program. She's an integrative veterinarian. And she has a program training people like me and all of you how to care for dogs holistically and work with people one-on-one to kind of be a support system. I look at it as you leave the vet and what now? Because a lot of times you leave the vet and they they don't give you a whole lot. They kind of tell you what's going on, send you home with some pills, and they don't tell you what's next, what to expect, what you can do to avoid the ear infection or what caused the ear infection. So she came up with a beautiful program she realized first that this holistic knowledge is not something that you have to have a medical degree for. It's all common sense. It's all knowledge that we all, as dog parents, should just have. It should be a requirement. But we've been trained over the last several decades to outsource our critical thinking to a medical professional and an authority, and that we couldn't possibly make these decisions or take this into our own hands. So she realized that that's not the case and that we absolutely can. So she developed a program training us how to coach others through doing that. So I went all in and did her program in 4 months, which is like a full time level. It's very condensed, great, robust program. And it taught me a lot. I really enjoyed it, and I thought it would give me more of a leg to stand on when working one on one with dog parents, sharing this type of information online. But unfortunately, I still get trolled heavily for not being a vet and for sharing medical information. Um, it didn't change a lot, but it did give me great experience. I'm thankful for the connections I made through that. And if that's something you want to look into, check it out. It's Dr. Ruth Roberts' certified holistic pet health coaching program. And so, anyway, I learned about that through listening to that podcast interview. And I did that right after Skip had passed. And while I was caring for my cancer patient, Anne, and during that time, I also started Tails Well Health, my Instagram account. And most of you have probably found me through that Instagram account. And again, I am so thankful for everyone that supports me there and shares my messages and my posts and keeps me going and shares your stories, share your advice and sharing critiques and suggestions. I appreciate it all. And I'm so happy to have finally got this podcast off the ground because, you know, if you've been following me a long time, you know that I tend to have these kinds of discussions. My husband calls them dissertations or rants in my stories. And this podcast is going to serve as a way to organize this information so that it's easier to find, easier to listen to at your own convenience. Because the stories, while I love having these kinds of discussions, the stories only stay up for 24 hours. And then sometimes I remember to put them in a story highlight, which are those little bubbles on my profile page. Sometimes I remember to put stories in those highlights, but often I don't. And even then, it's still just unorganized and cumbersome. And people are asking a lot of the same questions. And I'll say, go to my flea and tick story highlight, go to my spay and neuter story highlight. And I think that's kind of unprofessional, unorganized. And I would much rather put those discussions here where I can clearly label each episode based on one topic. So this one's going to be like an intro, a welcome, a what to expect, a why I'm here, who I am, why you should listen to me. And then the rest I plan to really sum them up in one clean topic. So that way, when you ask me, I can refer you to it. You can watch the video, you can listen to the audio only while you're driving, while you're doing dishes or folding laundry. I think it'll all just be so much better. And you'll have access to them forever and you can refer to them at any time. So here I am, another podcast starting out there. There's podcasts everywhere. And I think even 5, 6 years ago, I was like, everybody has a podcast. I'll never start a podcast. But it's fitting. It's fitting and it's needed because this information should stay out there forever, should reach more people, should be easier to access. So that's why I'm doing this. And any of you that have helped make this podcast a reality, I appreciate you so much. I don't have any formal sponsors yet or official, like formal public sponsors. I do have some behind the scenes that helped made this possible, helped me get my fancy microphone. And, those of you like my husband who have pushed me to finally get this going. And there's some great companies that I'm currently affiliated with, like Vengeance supplements. They make Motherboard, Venzio, Ripcord, great supplements. I use Motherboard every day for myself and for Pine. Adored Beast Apothecary. If I'm going to go anywhere for supplements, it's going to be Vengeance and Adored Beast first, and maybe the only ones that I go to. East Perry, and all of their sheepskin products. I work closely with them now. So I'm going to shout them out, even though they're not official sponsors of the podcast. They are great partners in the information that I'm sharing and the mission that I'm on, and I'll continue to shout them out as needed. But y'all are welcome. If you ever listen, you're welcome to officially sponsor the podcast in some degree if you'd like. So thank you guys again. I hope I covered everything. Remember that there's more details about what happened with Skip and Anne and their cancer, and I might have some more cancer specific episodes coming up where I go into more detail of what happened with them and what decisions I made and what you can do if you get cancer diagnoses and what that looks like. That'll likely come up on future episodes. But for now, you can go back to that first YouTube video about my journey. There's also a My Journey story highlight on Instagram that you can refer to for now. And yeah, for now, it'll just be me talking until I get the lay of the land. Like right now, hopefully, I can actually have a recording here and get this to somewhere where you can listen to it. This is my first time. But eventually, once I get the lay of the land and get this all sorted out, figured out, and dialed in, I plan to have some really wonderful guests. And I have listened to just about every podcast out there when it comes to holistic dog health. I love them, but I do see a lot of repeat topics, a lot of repeat guests. So I'm trying to bring something fresh. And in my intro, I love my intro when I talked about having heart led, real life, experience based, no dry science. I want it to be very relatable and I want to talk to people that are just different, that just have a fresh outlook and have relatable experiences for all of you and not just the like drier, sciencey, really heavy topics and really detailed topics that I tend to share on social media. Hopefully, I can achieve that for you. I think that will be a much better listening experience. But thank you guys again. And of course, love your dogs. We'll see you next time.